So, you might be um, hearing about what's been transpiring in the presidential elections in Venezuela. Well, what I can tell you for sure is that we don't know yet what happened in the elections. You might have heard all the stories that have been going around in international media saying that how the election was a fraud, Maduro hijacked it. When I mean Maduro is in President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, who has been president for more than 10 years already. But what I have been digging out is that everything that we've been hearing in the international media is actually so contrast to what is the truth behind what really happened in the election. I do not know for sure because we don't know yet. I do not speak for Venezuelans, but what I can tell you is that I do agree with some of the people that Maduro, he needs to go, and Maduro needs to be held accountable. But what I am happy for sure is that I am glad the opposition did not win the election because over the last 25 years, the opposition, backed by US interests, have been wanting to overthrow Venezuela and massively privatize every field of the sector. Now remember, Venezuela has one of the biggest oil reserves in the world. And what do you do when you want natural resources? Conquer them, destroy the country, choke their economic benefits. That is what has been happening over the last 25 years. Is that in spite that the US has been trying to break every economic bone of Venezuela, it has successfully deprivatized every sector from healthcare and education. Now, in spite of the massive poverty because of the so called socialism or so called socialist policies of then President Hugo Chavez, he's done everything to invest in school and healthcare and make sure that, like Cuba and Philippines, produce a number of doctors and nurses. Make sure that healthcare is for everybody. But what they don't tell you, what I mean opposition, is that the the numerous economic blockade and sanctions done by the US has led to a massive exodus and massive undrivable inflation over the 5 years ago has led many Venezuelans to leave Venezuela and migrate to the US in the first place. While that will be for another time, this is mostly about the election. Now, while in Venezuela, almost 90% of the media is owned by opposition and it's owned by massively privately by rich individuals who own corporations. Only 10% of Venezuela's state media is owned by the state, just like here in the US. But what we are not hearing, but what I did some research in the in Google is that while opposition and other international actors have been crying foul on rigged election and election fraud, President Maduro has actually appealed to the Supreme Court to finalize the results and release them afterward. Now, there's a real reason why Maduro is not willing to release the election results, the full final results. Now, do I think there's a bad reason behind it? Maybe, but there must be also a good reason why he probably is not. And it's not the reason why you will not hear from any pundit or think tank out there or any commentator in the news media. But it is in fact that opposition has a long history of rigging and stealing the elections for their own benefits. And I am glad that opposition has a long history of losing, because if the opposition had won, if the so called socialist regime had fell, it would just make things way much worse than its economic instability right now that's going on because of the so called policies by the president. That's the other thing that you will not hear in mainstream media. If your news source is CNN, BBC, Voice of America, or other European channels, and that's what they tell you about Venezuela, I suggest you turn off and re examine, cross examine this narrative that we've been told. Now, while Telesur, which means Television of the South, or South Television, or Telesouth, uh, it is a Venezuelan state-run media channel, but they have good stories and good analysis about geopolitics in South America and politics in Venezuela as well. And they're so balanced, they're so fair, and they know how to get close to the truth. Meanwhile, you hear the other Spanish channels like Telemundo or Univision, they're parroting that same narrative that you hear in CNN, Fox News, Voice of America, BBC, but they don't tell you the other side or one another. They show you one side. The other news outlets based in South America are able to show you both sides of the politics of South America. So be careful what you read, what you watch out there, because you may not know if it's real journalist or it's just propaganda. So be careful out there. Do your research, find what's true or false, and do your very best to try to find any red flags. So I'll see you in my next video.